Hello everyone, how are you? Hope you're doing well. Welcome to this virtual lesson. Here's Batul Said Ali and I'm recording this video for Hard Tahrik Public School for Girls, grade 10. So in this virtual lesson, I'm going to discuss with you patterns of organization. And we're going to solve these questions. We're going to answer these questions. What do we mean by patterns of organization? What are these patterns of organization? What are these organizational patterns? Why do we use them? What are the characteristics of these patterns? What are the clue words or the signals that usually show each pattern or indicate each pattern? And that's it. Okay, so let's start with the first thing, which is what do we mean by patterns of organization? Okay, pattern of organization, as you know, usually when writing, students might find it difficult to organize the section or sections of their writings. For example, if you're writing a paragraph, an essay, anything, okay? Sometimes students might find it very difficult to organize the sentences maybe in the paragraph or the paragraphs in their essays. So in order to organize their work, they usually resort or rely on various things. What are these various things? They are the patterns of organization. So as you can know, patterns of organization show the relationship between supporting details in paragraphs. We're gonna here discuss only paragraphs. We're not gonna discuss essays and chapters. We're gonna discuss only paragraphs. So usually when we're going to speak about patterns of organization, usually we're going to speak about the relationships between the supporting details, I mean the sentences, in the same unified paragraph. Okay, now the organization of supporting details helps you understand how an author thinks and helps you remember what you read. For example, if you're reading about causes and effects of smoking, okay, so whenever you know that here in this paragraph you have the effects of smoking and you figure out the clues and the signals that show this pattern, then you will know and you will remember always that this paragraph is speaking about the effects of smoking. So it usually helps you remember the main idea of the paragraph that you're reading. Now, in this table that we're going to discuss, we're going to explain the characteristics of the patterns, going to give some examples and some sample signals of each of the patterns. So let's shift here. So I'm going to repeat before we continue. Pattern of organization, as we said here, pattern of organization is or usually shows, okay, the relationship between supporting details, and we're going to stress on paragraphs. Okay, now let's shift here to the first organizational pattern, which is the cause and effect. What do we mean by cause and effect? Cause and effect usually describes or discusses an action that is caused by another action. So whenever something causes or is caused by another thing, or whenever something leads to another thing, then here we're going to discuss cause and effect. And you know what I mean by cause and effect. Now, here we have these questions. Why did this happen? What were the results of a particular event? Whenever we have such questions, then we're going to discuss, or then we're going to have an organizational pattern, which is the cause and effect. Now, what are the clue words that usually help us figure out this pattern? We have because, we have causes, for this reason, due to, we have produces, since, as a result, consequently, hence, etc. Therefore, thus. So all of these words, and as you know, these are transitional signals. Most of them are transitional signals. All of these signals and all of these clues usually help us figure out the pattern that we're going to have in the paragraph. Now, let me give you an example here. Public schools should require students to wear uniforms because they save parents money, de-emphasize passion, and create school spirit. As you can see here in this paragraph, of course, or in this sentence, okay, we have public schools should require students to wear uniforms because they save parents money. Because they save parents money. So wait a minute. Okay, Sorry. So as you can see here, that this signal, which is because, links these two areas to each other. The first area is public schools should require students to wear uniforms. Okay, why? Why do they or why should they require the students to wear these uniforms? Because they save parents. So this is the cause. So here we have like what? Cause effect relationship. Because this, we're gonna have this effect. So that's why we can say here that the pattern is cause effect. Another example, the large movement of people from rural to urban areas has major effects on a city's ability to provide housing, employment, and adequate sanitation services. Another time you have here effects, which also explains the relation between these two areas, which is a cause-effect one. Now let's shift to the second one. We have classification. What do I mean by classification? Usually in classification, we usually like categorize things, as you know. So usually we divide a topic into parts or groups and separately discusses each of these groups. Now, what are the signals or the clue word that usually show such a pattern? Here we have categories, classified as, classes, classifications, composed of, I don't know, maybe here types, varieties, ways. All of these words also show this pattern, classification, whenever we categorize and classify and divide things. Let me give you another example here. There are 3 kinds of book owners. Here's a paragraph. There are 3 kinds of book owners. The first has all the standard sets and bestsellers. The second has a great many books. The third has a few books sold many. So as you can see, kinds. Here they are categorizing. They are dividing. Okay, they are putting types of the book owners. And what is this? What is the relationship here? As you can see, the relationship is classification. As you can see, because we're gonna classify these book owners into 3 categories. Another one, a first date can end up being categorized as successful, a clingy, a boastful, or awkward. Also, categorized is another word that can show this pattern. Number 3. So another time, I'm gonna repeat all of this at the end with like one paragraph. Number 3, we have listing. What do I mean by listing? As you know, listing usually when you list something, series of items, facts, reasons, features. So whenever you list things, okay, this means that you have a listing pattern. Now, what are the signals or the clues that show such a pattern? We have like as well as, besides, maybe several, the following. So whenever you use these words, then you're gonna list. Okay, example, managers experience a number of different personnel problems that must be solved before a department can work effectively. So managers experience a number of different personnel problems, a number of different. What are these number of different? Of course, they're gonna figure them out in a paragraph, and that's why we can say that this paragraph uses the pattern which is listing, uses listing as a pattern. Another one, there are several different theories about the origin of the moon. Of course, they are going to list these several different theories in this paragraph. So what is the pattern of this paragraph? What is the relation among these supporting details in the paragraph? Of course, it is listing, because we are giving several different theories about the origin of the moon in this paragraph. Now, number 4, chronological order. You know chronological order. When we say chronological order, we mean time order. Usually we use it when we're going to narrate things, when we're going to tell stories, when we're going to like speak about sequence of events. So usually whenever we have narration, we use usually chronological. You know chronological, first, second, afterward we're going to discuss them. So here we have these signals: at last, at that time, before, during, eventually, finally, first, second, following, formerly, immediately, later, meanwhile, shortly. I don't know, all of these words, you can use them whenever you're going to narrate or to show things in chronological order. Okay, example. Okay. Many of the racial and ethnic groups that live in the Hawaiian Islands today arrived at different times in history. The death of Mac's mother created for him a shocked disbelief, then a personal loneliness and grief that led to declining health. So the first thing, the second thing, okay, chronological order. Now, process. What do you mean by process? Whenever we say process, we mean that we have a list of steps. Okay, list of steps, like details that show directions, maybe stages in which a certain thing usually is applied, maybe list of steps. Okay, so whenever we have these words also in the process of command first, second, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to make this, all of the following steps, all of these also show the pattern, the process pattern. Example: there are several steps that must be followed if gold is to be efficiently extracted and refined from the bedrock in South Africa's blah blah blah. So there are several steps. Maybe sometimes when you're preparing a certain recipe, also this is a process pattern. If you're gonna discuss them in a paragraph, also this is a process patterns. Now, comparison and contrast, which is very easy. Whenever you're gonna show similarities among things or differences also, then you're gonna use comparison and contrast. Comparison usually uses when you're gonna show the similarities as well as both, compared to, comparison, in comparison, in the same way, just as, like, likewise, resembles, etc. When you're gonna show differences, then you use although, as opposed to, but, differs, however, nevertheless, on the contrary, on the other hand, etc. in contrast. So sometimes you have the same paragraph only comparison, sometimes you have only contrast, and sometimes you have comparison and contrast. Okay, example. There are similar safety features on all the cars in the showroom, and of course you're gonna discuss in this paragraph the similar safety features, so this is comparison. Contrast: community service activities develop social and emotional skills of students, while academic class develop intellectual skills. So we're going to discuss these different skills in this paragraph, and this is contrast. Combination: gangs and fraternities share many characteristics, but are quite different. Share different at the same paragraph. Also, this is combination. Okay. Order of importance. No, I don't need this. Problem solution. What do you mean by problem solution? In this paragraph, usually, this paragraph usually presents significant problem, and then it explains it in detail. Then a possible solution is suggested. Okay. Usually, we have these also signals: need, challenge, issue, plan a need, problem, purpose. Propose. Resolve, remedied, respond to, etc. Suggest. So, example: many children suffer long-term consequences of bullying. However, the problem can be remedied through a three-pronged approach: educating the parents, encouraging a community atmosphere, and implementing peer mediation program. Okay, so here we have the problem, which is bullying. And here we have the solutions out there. So the pattern is problem and solution, pattern of organization. Spatial order. What do you mean by spatial order? Spatial order usually we use it when we're going to describe physical location or position, okay, in a space, in a certain space. So usually we use spatial order when you want to describe a physical location or position. What do we usually use? You can use beyond, in front of, inside, nearby, next to, opposite, outside, over, toward, under, within. So you're describing. Example. Let's see this. Drivers should sit 10 to 12 inches from the steering wheel to allow the airbag to inflate toward the chest and away from the face and neck. Here we're describing. So this is spatial order. Now, sometimes when you're describing nature, your house, etc., this is also spatial order. Now we have definition. Definition when there is a certain word or a concept and you are explaining it. Okay, so when you're explaining it, then this is definition. Defined is known, etc. Example: repression is the mind power to block fearful thoughts, impulses, and memories. For example, a person may repress or forget painful childhood memories. We're discussing here repression, so this is definition. Okay. Summary, usually it's detailed or it's used in conclusions when you sum up okay, and wrap up everything. When you wrap up all of the details, all in all, in brief, in conclusion, in short, in summary, on the whole, overall, to summarize, to sum up. Example. Overall, the changes that occurred in hockey have helped to improve the game, etc. So overall, this is conclusion. One exemplification, illustration, all of these when this author gives you a general statement and then supports this statement with more examples. Here we use, for example, for instance, that is, to illustrate, thus, such as, etc. Example, let me give an example here. Food labels provide important information. For example, the label on which Harvest Wheat dark whole grain bread states that one slice has 120 calories. So here when you give something and then you give or support this thing or issue with examples, then the pattern between the sentences is exemplification, and that's it for today. Now, I'm going to give some examples here for paragraphs. Maybe, I don't know, maybe here we have cause and effect. A study in Romania suggests that children who are abandoned at birth and placed in state-run institutions can eventually thrive if they leave the institution and are placed in foster care. In fact, children in the study who were placed in foster homes ended up on par emotionally, intellectually, and physically with children of the same age who had grown up with their biological families. In contrast, orphan children who never left the state-run institutions showed steady declines in their blah 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 blah. So here we have what? Oh, sorry, I have something else. So while the study supports the idea that foster care for abandoned children is better than institutional life, it's worth noting that Romanian institutions have a particularly horrific reputation for neglect. This may well account for the effects of long-term, etc. So here we can see in this paragraph we have various patterns. The first one is a contrast, not compare contrast, contrast, because we're contrasting here. In contrast, we're contrasting between these two children. Okay, the orphaned children who never left the state-run institutions and those who escaped this place. Here, so we have contrast, and here we have effects. We mentioned some effects, so also we have cause and effect pattern. Okay, so the paragraph opens with a clear cause and effect relationship, which is orphan children who enter foster care benefit from leaving the institution, and children who do not enter foster care do not fare as well. Note, however, that the two groups are also contrasted in order to prove the main idea expressed in the first sentence. So I think here is the discussion. Thank you for paying attention. If you have any further questions, you can send me on WhatsApp group or in the Teams one. And after watching this video, there is an assignment that you have to, there are some questions that you have to solve. And that's it. Thank you so much, ladies.